Hi guys, welcome back. Well, if you follow the channel, you'll know that in April this year I took my shiny KTM 890 adventure to Morocco for what should have been an incredible off-road adventure. And it was, at least for a few days, until in true KTM style I was left well and truly stranded at 2,000 metres high in the Anti-Atlas Mountains with an immobiliser problem and had to be recovered off the mountain. I've documented the whole journey and subsequent failure in previous videos and always said I'd do a follow-up. But this video is about a whole lot more than what it took to fix the bike and how KTM dealt with it. Welcome back to the channel. First up, a quick recap. Now, we had the truck in Marrakesh and thankfully I was able to load the bike onto the back of the truck and then get the whole lot back into Spain. Now, I should point out that there is one KTM dealership in Morocco, in Casablanca, but we were running short on time and I actually wanted the work done in Europe. At about the same time, we were actually trying to get in touch with KTM and that wasn't particularly easy. And therefore, Izzy was leaving a comment on the back of every KTM social media post to say, forget ready to race, we just want the damn thing to start, or words to that effect. And KTM UK did actually reach out and eventually we got a case number. Now, we explained the situation and they actually referred it to KTM Spain, who I have to say again were extremely helpful and basically left the ball in our court and said, find yourself a dealer that you're happy with, get in contact with us and we will go from there. And bearing in mind that the bike was still under warranty at this stage. Now, there was three main faults. One, the big one, the immobiliser. Second was the intermittent cruise control. It would work for a day, maybe 3 days, not work for a week and then come back on again. And the last one was the headlight, and I've got a really good answer for that, but stick with me. Okay, so I've got the bike back. I've just been in KTM for about 35 minutes chatting to the technician, understanding exactly what the problem was. So I'm just about to go for a spin and then I'll explain exactly what they've done, and fingers crossed we're all good. So over the next 6 weeks I wanted to make sure the bike was actually fixed, so I took the bike out at every opportunity. From fast main roads to road sweepers, stopping for a coffee to make sure everything was right. I also took it back to KTM for a service to ensure I kept KTM's mobility service, effectively 24/7 roadside assistance across Europe in the event that you break down. Now, it obviously doesn't cover off-road use, but it does cover you for vandalism, fire and attempted theft, and with KTM's fixed price servicing, I think it's worth paying. I also took the opportunity to enjoy some fire access roads whilst in Spain, on the thinking that if anything is loose or isn't quite right, this checkout could well highlight any concerns. Since the failure in Morocco, I've done just over 1,000 miles. And I should point out that I haven't changed the standard battery for a more powerful ion lithium unit as of yet. Whilst the bike was under warranty, I didn't want any comebacks from the dealership, but I will change it. So yeah, I have done a few miles on the bike and I've done it over quite a considerable period of time. Now, the bike is sorted. I'll start off with the immobiliser. So the immobiliser ring needed to be replaced and that was actually out of stock. It was a wait out item, which is quite ironic and not surprising. But in fairness to the dealership, they actually got authorization from KTM to actually replace the whole ignition barrel because it comes with the immobiliser ring on top of that and obviously new sets of keys, so they replaced the whole thing and that actually sorted out the second problem, which was the intermittent cruise control. Now, that's, if you look below the around the wiring harness and certainly coming out of the bottom of the ignition, it's very compact and everything is all zip tied up in terms of the wiring loom, and it's zip tied up too tight, and there lies part of the problem. So that fault has been rectified now as well. And the third fault was the headlights staying on. Okay, light is still on. Key is out of ignition. There's the dash. Key is out. Light has now gone out. And I've got my fault. Okay, so headlight is now out, but I'll turn that out. Headlights off. I've got to put my hands up and say you don't know what you don't know. But it did happen quite recently. I rolled up to a village, to a restaurant in the village. There was people sat outside, and I thought, I just turned the key off, and I rolled up to the restaurant, went in, booked a table, came out, and the headlight was on. So I thought, wow. Back to KTM, said, look, there's still a problem with the headlight. And he said, no, it's meant to do that. It's in the event, it's a safety thing, so in the event of a failure and you're traveling at speed, at least the headlight would stay on so you can see where you're going. So he said, basically, once you come to a stop, if you turn it on and then turn it off, the ignition, the headlight will go off, and that's exactly what it does. So that answers the question. So there isn't a fault with that. And every time that happened, when I think about it, a good example is the night that I turned up to Marrakesh at the truck. It was dark, it was late, my head was frazzled. I was really happy just to switch the bike off, and I rolled up to the truck and the headlight stayed on. That's exactly it. So the bike, I suppose in its entirety, is exactly how it should be. Now, whilst all this was happening, both on the ground in Morocco and subsequently when I put the videos out on YouTube, I received a huge amount of comments, emails, direct messages across various platforms, mainly of support, and they pretty much fell into three categories. The first up was the KTM owners. Now, a lot of people reaching out with 890s, Nordens, saying, look, I've got the same issue or very, very similar issue, and they've either done one or two things. They've persevered and got it sorted out, and then they've ended up doing lots of miles on the bike and ended up just loving the bike and keeping it. The other camp is there's a lot of people who had problem after problem after problem, through good money after bad, because the bike was out of warranty, and ended up just chopping it in for another brand. The second category is the T7 and GS Brigade, and I say that in the nicest possible way. I'm a big Yamaha fan, and if you've seen my previous videos, you'll know that I actually set out to buy a T7. And I think if you're a solo adventurous rider, then it's ideal. But we wanted something that could carry two up with lots of gear for between 4 and 8 weeks and do quite big mileage. And well, something that I could still use solo for adventurous riding and still, tick all the boxes. And to be honest with you, it wasn't the T7. The T7 is a little bit top heavy. Depending on variant, it's actually quite tall. I'm a bit of a short ass. And I think the bigger thing is that it was just too cramped for two people with all the gear. Now, the GS is a brilliant bike, and it does have its place, and I've had 3 over the years, and in fact I've had 7 BMWs over the last 25 years, but again, they're not without fault. I've spent a lot of money over the years at dealerships putting silly faults right, and been stranded in France with the GS 1200, and ultimately European bikes, again, they're not without fault, and that includes Ducati and Aprilia, and ultimately if you want that reliability, you've got to buy Japanese. Now, the third category was people giving me abuse. They're basically saying, you idiot, you bought a new bike. Not necessarily you bought a new KTM, but you bought a new bike. All new bikes are full of electronics. You should have bought a KLR 650, a DR 650, a Tenere 600, an XR XL. And look, I get it. All those bikes from the late 80s, they're early 90s, they're iconic in their own right. They're simple in design. There's no electronics, relatively easy to fix. I get it. Now, in 1989, I actually bought a Kawasaki Tengai, which is effectively a KLR 650, or sort of a dressed up version. It was red, it was beautiful, it was my pride and joy as a young lad. And subsequently, I bought a Honda Africa Twin 750, and thereafter a BMW F650. And in between that, I've ridden every big thumper parallel twin of that era. And I love them, and I still love them to this day. And every time I see one, I get a little sort of wave of excitement. It will stop me in my tracks. But here is the thing. Unless you are an itchy boots and you can source a good model and put some serious money into it. Now, the chances are you're going to have to do something with the headlights because they're rubbish. You're going to have to definitely do something with the suspension, because even the original suspension when it came out of the factory wasn't brilliant. You're going to have to replace a lot of seals, including fork seals, and potentially do something about the forks. brakes, and so on. And the list goes on and on and on. And there's a lot to do. And if you've followed Itchy Boots and the sort of rebuild of her Tenere, there is a huge amount to do, and you're not always going to get the parts that easily. And if you're not getting the parts that easily in Europe, when there's the internet and good communication, social media, then you're really going to struggle if you're elsewhere. Now, I think if I was out doing a solo ride, going around the world and going across Mongolia, then yes, that would be my bike of choice, and it would never be the KTM. As much as I love it, and so it sort of leaves me in a sort of a dilemma, really. What do I do? Do I keep the bike, or do I sell the bike? And to be honest with you, I think if I was to sell the bike right now, I would actually lose a huge amount of money. I'd lose somewhere in the region of £4,000 to £5,000, and that's a really bitter pill to have to swallow. And particularly as I love the bike, I love to ride the bike. I was out on the bike yesterday, and it's just a beautiful thing. I really, really do like it. Has the seat of doubt disappeared? No, it'll probably never disappear. It'll always sort of be there. But if I can ride the bike for a few years, enjoy it, do some big trips on it, then I think it's worth keeping. I still rate it as a bike, from a rider's perspective. I think it's just fantastic. So that's pretty much where I'm at. I'd love to know your thoughts on any of this, any of the stuff we've talked about. And so to anyone who's got a DR, an XR, whatever it is, I am the biggest fan. So yeah, don't be giving me a hard time. I know there's there's a really big following out there. You only have to look at Sand Raiders and their, what they do, and yeah, I'm quite envious, if I'm honest with you. So it is my first KTM. I still maintain it will be my last, and yeah, you make your choices, and sometimes you got to stand by them. Now, we all talk about the Unicorn, that perfect adventure bike, and for me, I'd love Honda to build a 600cc parallel twin, lightweight, no frills, big fuel tank, no electronics, and of course with a reasonable price tag. But that's not going to happen, and I know it's a bit cliche, but it is that age-old question: what is the right bike for your adventure? And the answer, of course, is the bike you're on. And for me, I still rate the 890 Adventure. But I do have to say that KTM, despite my initial issue with them and certainly get in touch with them, they did actually come good, and I have to give the dealership a shout out, because they were superb. They really wanted to go the extra mile and make sure that bike was correct. That's Antimotos in Ontinyent in Spain. I can't praise them highly enough. They were just superb. Guys, that's it. Thank you so much for all the support on the channel. I'd love to know your thoughts, and if you do have an old bike, a T7 or a GS, then leave me a comment, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.